My name is Preston Shipp, and for several years I served as an Assistant Attorney General for the state of Tennessee. And it was my job to argue in court that someone who had been convicted of a crime and sentenced to time in prison, that needed to be affirmed on appeal, that what had happened was exactly what needed to happen. I hold Jesus in the highest esteem, and I care a great deal about the church and what the church is called to do and to be. How can I reconcile the job I was being asked to do as a prosecutor with my faith in Jesus, who came proclaiming release for prisoners? I was born in Nashville, Tennessee. I've lived in Nashville just about my entire life.
Law enforcement and things like that has always been very much a part of who he was. He really did watch a lot of Miami Vice.
I really gravitated to that world because it was so exciting. You had good guys and bad guys. You know, you had good guys who were wearing the white hats and they were trying to make the world safer. Then in college, I had an internship with the Nashville Prosecutor's office. These are the folks who are telling law enforcement officers what to do. They were just so sharp and so educated and so in control. And I thought, I need to go be a prosecutor.
I met Preston at Lipscomb University. We started dating in the fall. By April, he proposed. But we decided that June to marry. Our kids came along very quickly. Lila, age 8, Ruby, age 6, and Levi, 3.
It was a whirlwind.
Seems to have worked so far. We've been married almost 14 years. I remember after he graduated from law school, when he was accepted into the Supreme Court, he felt very proud to be successful in what he'd always wanted to do.
I felt like, you know, this is exactly God's will for my life. I was going to be a career prosecutor, make the move into becoming a judge. I had my whole career mapped out.
My dad's name is Preston Shipp. He does law. I think he was working as an executor for a judge.
You mean a prosecutor?
I guess so.
I met Preston when we were working together at the Attorney General's office. When a defendant appeals, we would get essentially written transcripts and copies of exhibits, which would be photographs, sometimes videos, audio recordings and things. 99% of the time you are not going to have a defendant in the courtroom. Appellate prosecutors are dealing strictly with paper.
In the 4 years that I worked there, I think I did 300 cases, 250, 300 briefs.
It does get to be almost like an assembly line feeling. You have a role to vindicate society. You have a role to vindicate the interests of the victims.
And that's how you sleep at night. You are 100% sure you're doing the right thing all the time. And you're 100% sure that they are deserving of whatever punishment they've received.
The easy way to do the job is to overemphasize the negative.
When the only information that you receive about a person is the worst thing that they've ever done, you can fall into the trap of regarding them as less than human.
I got involved in prison ministry when Preston was just a very small baby. I don't know that I ever really told him that this was important. I think he just observed that I felt that it was important. And then he started going with me occasionally after he turned 18.
I think he's always had a heart for service and for serving people, and that felt natural to him to be a part of the prison ministry at our church.
Y'all know the reason why I go out there, right? It's because, those guys...
they can't have worship services
they can't go to church. And we go out there and we talk about the Bible and we say prayers and we sing songs, but the point of all of that is to let them know that we love them and God loves them.
We really want our family to be a family that takes Christianity very seriously. I feel like every aspect of our lives has to be shaped by our beliefs and our faith.
It never occurred to me that there might be, a conflict of interest that would cause
Preston some angst down the road because of his concern for incarcerated people.
As a lot of us do, he compartmentalized a lot of his life, and this is what I do at church, and then this is what I do at work, and this is what I do at home, and none of those things affected the other.
Things started to unravel for me when I started actually teaching college classes out at the prison.
We take courses that would normally meet on campus and we relocate those to the Tennessee Prison for Women. One of the things we wanted to do pretty early on with the LIFE program was to raise questions about criminal justice.
There's a big difference in studying criminal justice just within the safe walls of academia. Something else to do it at a prison where half the class is intimately familiar with the process.
Initially, the dynamic in the classroom was just fear. The outside students, all the stereotypes, everything that they had seen in the media was on their mind. And so they were afraid. They were going into a prison. What was going to happen?
One of the students from campus got to the parking lot of the prison, saw the razor wire, and never got out of their car. Turned right around and just drove back to campus, just like, forget it. The inmates were scared to death because they didn't know whether they could do the college work. They had almost zero confidence in their ability to do the work. So we would take breaks during the class, extended breaks, so that they could talk about the television shows that they watch and the music that they listen to. I really thought it was important for them to see that they're not that different. One of the shortcomings of traditional prison ministry is that it's sort of a one-way street. It's mostly people from the outside coming in and talking or preaching or praying or reading or singing or whatever. And so you don't hear a whole lot from the people that you're going in there to be with. Once I went in there and started teaching, and we created that space for dialogue, then I started hearing stories. Cynthia Brown was one of my best students. She was serving time for homicide that she had committed when she was 16 years old. And by the time I got to know her, and she had already served several years in prison. Cynthia?
Yeah?
Hey, it's Preston.
Hi, Preston.
We're gonna put you on speakerphone so that we can hear you.
Preston was my teacher of the first class. I thought he was just going to be an arrogant jerk, like what I felt most prosecutors would be. But the first night of class, even though I think maybe everybody was feeling that way, it turned out to be completely different. Like, the people are just really great, and they're really accepting.
And during the breaks and before and after class, we got to know each other.
We talk about your obsession with Star Wars. We talk about, what do we talk about?
Oh, we talk about books. Come on,
we talk about books.
Yeah, we got to be friends.
He just didn't talk like the kind of person I thought he was going to be. He's cool. Kinda.
It's okay, it's okay.
And I noticed that Preston and Cynthia, they just sort of had an ability to communicate in a way perhaps that was unique or special.
The system was dealing with a 16-year-old, and it didn't recognize the enormous potential that she had. And we know that kids have potential to change. We know that physiologically they are different from adults. Psychologically they're different from adults. But it had no regard for Cynthia's potential. It just viewed her as, at 16 she did this, and therefore she is disposable. And threw away this person who has so much to offer. That's right in line, I think, with what Jesus talks about in Matthew 25, when he says, when you go to a prison and you visit someone, that's what you're doing for me. That alternative vision of community, I think, is at the core of the gospel.
Preston is first and foremost a person of faith. He is a Christian. It is who Preston is. This experience confronted him. Can we, on one day during our week, talk about and celebrate grace, and the rest of the week then be agents of retribution? And that question kind of hit him cold.
I could tell that he was beginning to be affected by the work because he would come home a little depressed.
I'm sure that it manifested itself in ways that I might not have been mindful of.
He was very quiet. He was withdrawn. He would kind of be easily frustrated with the kids.
I felt trapped, and it was a very desperate feeling. Like, how in the world can I write one more brief when I feel the way that I do?
He really, really wanted to quit, but he couldn't. He realized that he had a family to provide for at this point. It was definitely a stressful time in our relationship with each other as well.
The deeper I got, the worse it got. And the better I got to know the women, the more hypocritical I felt. There's a lot about Cynthia's life that I did not know. Mother had abandoned her. For the 2 weeks leading up to her crime, you know, she had been subjected to sexual abuse several times. She was living with a pimp who was abusing her. You know, she was afraid. She was 16. And this man, who was twice her age, took her to his house. It was a prostitution deal. He was bragging about how many guns he had, and she was afraid of him.
I thought he was reaching for guns. I'm like, oh shit, you know what I'm saying? That's what he's done. He's gonna murder me or rape me or something.
Yeah. And then what did you do?
I shot him.
I always assumed that these are autonomous individuals. They had free will and they just decided to break the law. And once I got into the prison and started hearing their stories, it's like, no, I mean, these are people who were in a bad situation. And I can't say that I would have acted any differently.
It was strange for me to see him have such a change, to go from being very enthusiastic and encouraged and excited and proud to being very depressed, concerned, disappointed, and confused.
You know, I was like, I never should have been in this. You know, this is a system that is opposed to what I've come to understand the gospel to be. Why in the world did I labor in that system for years? I felt like a huge hypocrite.
We needed him to kind of plug back into things around the house and to be a little more stable when he was around.
It took 2 years for me to figure out how to get out of that situation. I left the AG's office altogether. I was so happy. I was like, well, finally, you know, I'm no longer a prosecutor. I don't have to feel hypocritical anymore. I thought it was great. Whenever the Court of Criminal Appeals or the Supreme Court issues its opinion in a case, where I was the appellate prosecutor, even after I left the AG's office, I would get a copy of the opinion. The court clerk would send me a copy of the opinion. And I got a copy of an opinion in the mail, which was not unusual. Open it up, and it's got Cynthia's name on it, Cynthia Denise Brown. I had been the assistant AG who would argue that she needed to serve a life sentence in prison.
I think it broke his heart.
When you read the transcript, you know, about the crime that Cynthia committed, it's a pretty one-sided story, you know. And the way that I wrote my brief was pretty one-sided. You know, I dealt with all her issues and said, no, this person took another person's life and she needs to go to prison for it, even though she was only 16 when it happened. To then find out that no, she's more than the worst thing she ever did. She's also this articulate, very smart, you know, funny student in my class. And, you know, you couldn't reconcile the two. I couldn't reconcile the two. How could that be the same person? And I knew that she was going to get a copy of the opinion.
The first thing, it was just like a snap kind of reaction. I just had really sat down to just really read through the opinion, and I looked and I saw his name, and I don't know, it just kind of threw me off. I kind of felt like I had this little haven with Lipscomb. You know, I didn't feel judged. Then when I realized he had a role in my case, and it was like I was in the courtroom with the prosecutors, with the judges all over again, I think I kind of felt betrayed.
You were the one that put her in prison.
Yeah.
It would be hard to know that your teacher put you in prison. Really hurt them, and then you were supposed to be friends with them.
You know, I felt like I needed her to forgive me. At the end of the semester party is when we were able that's when we were able to kind of sit down and hash it all out. Just the two of us.
I remember him saying he couldn't really reconcile the two people, the Cynthia in the banker box of records and the Cynthia that he knew from class. Kind of reminded me that he was still my friend, he was still Preston, and I didn't have to worry about that. He didn't judge me, he did see me as a person. He didn't just see me as this thing that I had been charged with or all the horrible things that they've done about me. Well, I'm not going to be angry at Preston. No. I'll let Preston be my friend.
You have 10 seconds left on this call.
Bye.
What about those other 250 or 300 people that I argued that they needed to go to prison? Would I feel the same way about them? Would they be my friends? Would I feel compassion for them? And would I question the arguments that I made? Why did I ever feel comfortable making arguments about the fate of people I didn't know and had never met? This system that we have is broken. The way that we are incarcerating people at a rate that surpasses even China, it's not working. This mass incarceration is ruining families.
I believe our justice system is the best in the world. You know, I don't know if I was similarly situated that I would have felt a need to apologize necessarily. I just represent whoever my client is, whether it's the state or whether it's an individual. And that's where I fit in. And I think early on, that's where Preston fit in.
For so long, I felt like the system did what the system needed to do. So I think it was kind of a gradual change in me as well.
I felt like after talking to her that she had forgiven me for having been a prosecutor on her case.
I think he went not knowing what to expect, feeling like he was going to take something to the women in the prison. And he came home feeling like they had renewed his commitment to his faith. We want to be a family that is open to God's work. And I felt very much so like his hand was at work in this situation.
He's been on a long journey, and it's been enjoyable as a professor to watch him grow and mature.
How are we to live in a world where some people are viewed as disposable? And I think that the gospel makes certain demands on us, that we go to them, we're present to them, and we form community with them. You have to be willing to be among criminals the way that Jesus was. Be willing to leave the safety and the comfort of your pew and go find out what God is doing in other places. Half a mile away from where Cynthia's crime occurred. I mean, that's where I grew up. You know, it all started at a Sonic restaurant less than probably half a mile away from where I grew up. But she wasn't part of my community. I think you have to be willing to regard other people as we're the same, you know. And somehow my salvation is bound up with those people in prison. I am altogether convinced that that is true. Jesus is no longer around to do the work of God. That is up to us.